Dr. Zarabeth adjusted her scanning device for the third time, her pale blue skin showing faint ripples of nervous energy. The medical bay of the Galactic Health Initiative station hummed quietly around her as she prepared for what should have been a routine examination. Her species, the Velthari, had conducted medical assessments on over 400 different alien species across the galaxy. She was considered one of their finest physicians, with decades of experience treating everything from silicon-based crystalline beings to the gaseous, nebula collective entities. But this was different. This was her first time examining a human. The stories about humans had been circulating through the medical community for months now. Tales of impossible resilience, of beings who could survive injuries that would kill most species instantly, of creatures who seemed to thrive on what other races considered toxic substances. Most of the medical establishment dismissed these stories as exaggeration, the kind of myths that always surrounded newly discovered species. Zarabeth had been skeptical too, until she received the assignment. The human delegation to the Galactic Council had requested comprehensive medical evaluations for their diplomatic team, standard procedure for any species seeking membership in the galactic community. What wasn't standard was the extensive list of warnings and precautions that came with the assignment. The door to the medical bay slid open with a soft hiss, and Zarabeth felt her respiratory organs skip a beat. The human who entered was tall by galactic standards, standing nearly 2 meters in height. His skin was a warm brown color, and he moved with a fluid grace that seemed almost predatory to her trained eye. Most concerning of all were his eyes, small and forward-facing like those of a natural hunter, scanning the room with obvious intelligence. "Dr. Zarabeth, I presume?" The human's voice was deep and resonant, causing an unexpected shiver to run through her nervous system. "I'm Commander Marcus Chen, Earth's military attaché to the diplomatic mission." She consulted her tablet, trying to maintain professional composure. "Yes, Commander Chen. Please take a seat on the examination platform. This should be a straightforward assessment. Nothing to cause concern." Marcus nodded and moved toward the platform with that same unsettling grace. As he passed near her, Zarabeth caught his scent, something that her medical training told her she should analyze clinically. Instead, she found herself momentarily distracted by how different it was from any species she'd encountered before. There was something warm and alive about it, something that spoke to parts of her brain she didn't usually access during medical examinations. "I should mention," Marcus said as he settled onto the platform, "I've been briefed about the cultural differences between our species. I understand that humans are considered somewhat unusual by galactic medical standards." Zarabeth looked up from her equipment, meeting those strange, forward-facing eyes. "Every species has its unique characteristics, Commander. I'm sure it will be perfectly routine." She activated her primary scanner, a device that could analyze cellular structure, organ function, and metabolic processes across hundreds of known species. The readout immediately began displaying data that made her manipulator appendages freeze mid-motion. The human's cardiovascular system was unlike anything in her medical database. Instead of the efficient, low-pressure circulation common to most species, Marcus's system operated at pressures that would burst the blood vessels of any Velthari. His heart, a muscular organ roughly the size of his closed fist, was pumping with tremendous force, cycling his entire blood supply through his body multiple times per minute. "Is everything all right, Doctor?" Marcus asked, noticing her sudden stillness. "Perfectly fine," she managed, though her skin was beginning to show the pale purple flush that indicated elevated stress hormones. "Your cardiovascular readings are just more robust than I expected." She moved to the next set of scans, focusing on his skeletal and muscular systems. The results were even more alarming. The human's bones were incredibly dense, with a calcium phosphate matrix that could withstand impacts that would shatter most species' skeletons. His musculature showed a redundancy that seemed almost wasteful from an evolutionary perspective, with multiple muscle groups capable of performing the same functions. "Commander, could you please demonstrate your range of motion? Simply raise your arms above your head and then touch your toes." Marcus complied, and Zarabeth watched in fascination as his body moved through ranges of motion that should have been impossible given the density of his skeletal structure. The interplay of muscles under his skin created shifting patterns that her scanner tracked with increasing detail. When he bent to touch his toes, bringing his face much closer to hers, Zarabeth felt another of those unexpected shivers. There was something about the way humans moved, something about their physical presence that was affecting her in ways her medical training hadn't prepared her for. "Doctor," Marcus said quietly, still in the bent position, "you mentioned cultural differences. I hope I'm not doing anything that makes you uncomfortable. Human physiology can be intimidating to species that aren't familiar with it." The concern in his voice was genuine, and Zarabeth found herself appreciating the thoughtfulness behind it. Most species she examined were either indifferent to her reactions or actively hostile to the examination process. This human was actually concerned about her well-being. "Not at all, Commander. I'm simply fascinated by your species' unique adaptations." She gestured for him to straighten up, trying to regain her professional composure. "Could you tell me about your homeworld's environment? It would help me understand these readings." Marcus returned to an upright position and she immediately began scanning his respiratory system. Earth is what we call a death world by most galactic standards. High gravity, extreme weather variations, dangerous wildlife, geological instability. Our species evolved to survive in conditions that most others would find lethal. The respiratory scans confirmed his statement. The human's lungs were capable of processing atmospheric compositions that would poison most species. His oxygen metabolism was so efficient that he could probably survive in environments with oxygen levels that would cause respiratory failure in a Velthari. As she continued the examination, moving through neurological scans and metabolic assessments, Zarabeth began to understand why the stories about humans had seemed so unbelievable. Every system in Marcus's body was built for survival in conditions that most species couldn't even imagine. Yet despite this obvious physical superiority, he remained patient and cooperative throughout the examination, even offering explanations when her readings seemed particularly unusual. The final scan focused on his endocrine and immune systems, and the results left her staring at her equipment in amazement. The human's body was a chemical warfare laboratory, capable of producing compounds that could fight off infections, regulate stress responses, and maintain homeostasis in conditions that would overwhelm most species' biological systems. "Doctor?" Marcus's voice broke through her analysis. "You've been staring at that readout for several minutes. Is there something wrong?" Zarabeth looked up to find him watching her with those intense eyes, and she realized that somewhere during the examination, her perception of this human had shifted dramatically. He wasn't just another alien species to be cataloged and filed away. He was something entirely new, something that challenged everything she thought she knew about biology and evolution. And despite her scientific training, despite her professional objectivity, she was finding herself increasingly attracted to that difference. "There's nothing wrong," Zarabeth said, though her skin continued to display that telltale purple flush. "Your physiology is simply the most remarkable I've encountered in my career." Marcus smiled, an expression that revealed his teeth. On most species, such a display would be considered a threat, but somehow the human's smile seemed warm and genuine. "I'll take that as a compliment, Doctor. Though I should warn you, I'm probably one of the less impressive examples of human physiology. You should see some of our athletes or soldiers who've been through enhancement programs." The thought of humans even more physically capable than Marcus sent another shiver through Zarabeth's nervous system. She forced herself to focus on her scanner readings, trying to maintain some semblance of professional detachment. "I need to conduct some stress response tests," she said, consulting her tablet. "Standard procedure involves monitoring physiological changes under controlled stress conditions. Are you comfortable with that?" "Of course. What kind of stress are we talking about?" Zarabeth activated a section of the medical bay that most species found mildly uncomfortable. The temperature dropped by 10 degrees. Bright lights began flashing in patterns designed to trigger anxiety responses, and a low-frequency sound began emanating from hidden speakers. For most aliens, this combination would elevate stress hormones and provide clear readings on their autonomous nervous systems. Marcus barely seemed to notice. His heart rate increased slightly, but remained well within normal ranges for his species. His breathing stayed steady and controlled. Most remarkably, his brain activity showed patterns that indicated not distress, but heightened awareness and focus. "Interesting," Zarabeth murmured, adjusting the controls to increase the intensity of the stimuli. "Doctor," Marcus said calmly, "even as the environmental controls created conditions that would send most species into panic, I should mention that humans are adapted to high-stress environments. Our military training specifically teaches us to remain functional under adverse conditions. She increased the intensity again, pushing the environmental controls to levels that were considered the maximum safe exposure for most species. Marcus's physiology adapted seamlessly, his body making minor adjustments to maintain optimal function. If anything, he seemed more alert and focused than before. "This is extraordinary," Zarabeth said, her scientific fascination overriding her growing personal interest. "Your species doesn't just survive stress, you actually perform better under pressure." "It's one of our defining characteristics," Marcus agreed. "Humans tend to thrive in situations that other species find overwhelming. It's probably why we've been so successful as explorers and survivors." Zarabeth deactivated the stress simulation and watched as Marcus's body smoothly transitioned back to baseline levels. The efficiency of his physiological responses was unlike anything in the medical literature. Most species showed significant recovery periods after stress exposure, but the humans seemed to bounce back instantly. "I need to take some biological samples," she said, retrieving a collection kit from her equipment array. "Blood, tissue, and cellular samples for detailed analysis. Is that acceptable?" "Absolutely. Take whatever you need." She approached him with the sampling device, a small instrument that could extract microscopic amounts of biological material for analysis. As she moved closer, that strange scent became more noticeable, and she found herself having to concentrate harder on her work. The blood sample revealed even more surprises. Human blood was incredibly complex, packed with specialized cells and proteins that served multiple functions. Their immune system was like a military organization, with different types of cells serving as scouts, attackers, defenders, and support units. The redundancy was astounding. If one system failed, 3 others could step in to compensate. "Your immune system," she said, studying the analysis. "It's designed to fight off threats that most species have never even encountered. Viral, bacterial, fungal, parasitic, even some chemical threats. How dangerous is your homeworld?" Marcus chuckled, a sound that Zarabeth found surprisingly pleasant. "Earth is basically trying to kill everything that lives on it at all times." "Our immune systems had to evolve to handle constant biological warfare. We're exposed to thousands of potentially harmful microorganisms every day." The tissue sample provided insights into human cellular regeneration that made Zarabeth question everything she thought she knew about biology. Human cells could repair damage, replace themselves, and even adapt to new conditions at rates that bordered on the miraculous. Their healing factor wasn't immediate like some species, but it was incredibly thorough and efficient. "Commander," she said, looking up from her analysis, "according to these readings, your body is constantly repairing and improving itself. You're essentially rebuilding your entire cellular structure on a continuous basis. Is that unusual?" Marcus asked. "I mean, I know humans heal faster than some species, but I figured all biological entities had some form of regeneration." "Not like this," Zarabeth said, her voice carrying a note of awe. "Most species heal by forming scar tissue or partial repairs. Your body actually reconstructs damaged areas to be stronger than they were originally. It's as if every injury teaches your cells how to be more resilient." She moved to conduct the final series of tests, focusing on his neurological function. The results were perhaps the most surprising of all. The human brain was incredibly complex, with neural pathways that seemed almost chaotic at first glance, but revealed sophisticated patterns under detailed analysis. "Your cognitive processes," she said, watching the neural activity patterns on her screen. "They're incredibly dynamic. Most species think in relatively linear patterns, but your brain is processing multiple streams of information simultaneously. Humans are natural problem solvers," Marcus explained. "We have to be. Our environment throws so many variables at us that we've evolved to think in multiple dimensions at once." As Zarabeth completed her neurological scans, she began to understand why the stories about humans had seemed so impossible. Their species wasn't just adapted to survive in harsh conditions. They were adapted to thrive in them. Every system in their bodies was designed for efficiency, redundancy, and continuous improvement. But more than that, she was beginning to appreciate the person behind the physiology. Marcus had been patient, cooperative, and genuinely interested in her work throughout the entire examination. He answered her questions thoughtfully, offered insights into human biology and culture, and seemed genuinely concerned about making the process as easy as possible for her. "I think that completes the basic assessment," she said, reviewing her notes. "I'll need some time to compile a full report, but I can say that your species is remarkably well adapted for survival and success in diverse environments." "Thank you, Doctor. I hope the examination wasn't too challenging for you. I know human physiology can be overwhelming for medical professionals who aren't familiar with it." Zarabeth looked up at him, noting again how his concern seemed genuine rather than perfunctory. "Actually, Commander, it's been one of the most fascinating examinations of my career. Your species challenges a lot of assumptions about biological limitations." Marcus stood from the examination platform, and as he did, Zarabeth realized she was sorry to see the session end. There was something about this human that intrigued her beyond mere scientific curiosity, though she couldn't quite identify what it was. "Doctor," Marcus said as he prepared to leave, "I wonder if I could ask you something. The other members of our diplomatic team will be coming in for examinations over the next few days. If you're interested, I'd be happy to provide some background information about human physiology that might make their assessments easier." The offer was practical and professional, but Zarabeth felt her skin flush purple again as she realized she very much wanted to see him again. "That would be very helpful, Commander. Thank you." 2 days later, Zarabeth found herself preparing for the arrival of the second human diplomat with unusual anticipation. She had spent the previous evening reviewing her notes from Marcus's examination, ostensibly to prepare for the next assessment, but she couldn't deny that part of her motivation was simply to relive the experience. Her colleague, Dr. Veltar, had stopped by her office earlier that morning with barely concealed curiosity about her first human examination. "The entire medical staff is talking about your preliminary report," Veltar had said, his orange skin showing patches of excitement coloration. "Some of the readings you've documented seem impossible. Are you certain your equipment was functioning properly?" Zarabeth had assured him that she had run multiple diagnostic checks, but she understood his skepticism. Even she had trouble believing some of the data she had collected. When the door to the medical bay opened, she expected to see Marcus returning with additional information, as he had promised. Instead, she was greeted by a human female who immediately challenged every assumption she had made about human sexual dimorphism. "Dr. Zarabeth, I'm Dr. Sarah Okafor, the mission xenobiologist. Commander Chen said you might appreciate some advance warning about human physiological variations." The human female was several centimeters shorter than Marcus, but possessed the same fluid grace and obvious physical capability. Her skin was darker than his, with a rich brown tone that seemed to absorb and reflect light in fascinating patterns. Most surprisingly, her muscular development was nearly as impressive as the male's, though distributed differently across her frame. "Dr. Okafor, please make yourself comfortable on the examination platform. I must admit I was expecting Commander Chen." Sarah smiled as she settled onto the platform, and Zarabeth noted that the human female's teeth were just as white and even as the male's. "Marcus had to attend a diplomatic briefing, but he wanted to make sure you had the background information you needed. He was quite impressed with your thoroughness yesterday." The comment sent an unexpected warmth through Zarabeth's system, though she tried to maintain professional composure. "I simply followed standard examination protocols. According to Marcus, you were much more detailed and careful than most medical professionals his unit has encountered. He said you actually seemed interested in understanding human physiology, rather than just categorizing it." As Zarabeth began her initial scans of the human female, she discovered that sexual dimorphism in humans was far more subtle than in most species. While Sarah was smaller and less muscular than Marcus, her cardiovascular system showed the same incredible efficiency. Her bone density was only marginally lower, and her immune system was equally robust. "Dr. Okafor, your species shows remarkably little variation between sexes compared to most galactic races. In many species, males and females are so different, they're almost separate subspecies. Humans evolved as cooperative hunters and gatherers," Sarah explained, as Zarabeth conducted her respiratory analysis. "Both sexes needed to be capable of surviving in dangerous environments. The differences between us are mostly related to reproductive specialization, rather than survival capability." The examination proceeded smoothly, with Sarah proving to be as cooperative and informative as Marcus had been. However, Zarabeth found herself constantly comparing the female's responses to those of the male, and she realized she was hoping that Marcus would arrive before the session ended. Halfway through the neurological assessment, her wish was granted. The medical bay door opened to admit Marcus, carrying a portable data pad and wearing what appeared to be a more casual version of his diplomatic uniform. "Dr. Okafor, how's the examination going?" he asked, then turned to Zarabeth. "Doctor, I brought those background files I mentioned, if you have time to review them." The presence of both humans in the medical bay created an interesting dynamic that Zarabeth's medical training helped her analyze objectively, even as her personal reactions became more complex. The two humans clearly worked well together, communicating through subtle cues and shared references that spoke to a deep professional relationship. "Marcus," Sarah said from the examination platform, "you should see these neurological scans Dr. Zarabeth is taking. The detail is incredible. She's mapping neural pathways that I didn't even know were visible with standard medical equipment." Marcus moved closer to examine the display, bringing him within arm's reach of Zarabeth. His presence was distracting in ways she was still trying to understand, but she forced herself to focus on explaining the results. "Your colleague's brain activity shows the same complex, multi-threading patterns I observed in your examination, Commander. However, Dr. Okafor's neural network seems optimized for different types of processing." "That makes sense," Marcus said, studying the readouts with obvious intelligence. Sarah's background is in xenobiology and linguistics. Her brain has been trained to process and categorize information about alien life forms and communication systems. While Marcus, Sarah added, has been trained for tactical analysis and crisis management. His neural pathways are probably optimized for rapid decision-making under pressure. Zarabeth looked between the two humans, fascinated by how their different specializations had shaped their neurological development. "Your species demonstrates incredible adaptability. Most races show very little neurological variation between individuals, but you seem to physically adapt to your chosen fields of expertise." "Neuroplasticity," Sarah said. "Human brains continue developing and adapting throughout our lives. We literally rewire ourselves based on our experiences and training." As Zarabeth completed the examination, she found herself reluctant to see the session end. The interaction between the two humans had been educational and engaging. But more than that, she had enjoyed the opportunity to spend more time with Marcus, even in a professional context. "Commander," she said as she compiled her final notes, "those background files you mentioned would be very helpful for tomorrow's examination." "Of course. Would you prefer I upload them to your system, or would you like to review them together? I could explain some of the more technical aspects of human physiology that might not be obvious from the raw data." The offer to spend additional time together, even for professional purposes, was exactly what Zarabeth had been hoping for. "A personal review would be very helpful. When would be convenient for you?" "I'm free this evening if that works for your schedule. We could meet in one of the station's conference rooms, or if you prefer, my quarters have a good workspace setup." Zarabeth felt her skin flush purple again at the suggestion of meeting in his private quarters, though she recognized the offer was purely practical. "A conference room would be appropriate. Shall we say 1900 hours? Perfect. Conference room 7 has good holographic display capabilities if we need to review any three-dimensional anatomical data." After the humans left, Zarabeth found herself reviewing the day's examinations with unusual focus on the personal interactions rather than the medical data. She was attracted to Marcus. She could no longer deny that to herself, but she wasn't sure whether her feelings were based on scientific fascination with his species or something more personal. That evening, as she prepared for their meeting, she found herself paying more attention to her appearance than was typical for a professional consultation. She adjusted her medical robes to display her natural coloration more attractively, and she made sure her skin was showing the pale blue tones that indicated health and vitality, rather than the stress purples that had been appearing during the examinations. As she walked toward Conference Room 7, Zarabeth realized that her interest in human physiology was becoming secondary to her interest in one particular human. The question was whether Marcus had any idea of the effect he was having on her, and more importantly, whether humans were even capable of finding other species attractive. Conference Room 7 was more intimate than Zarabeth had expected, with soft lighting and a small table surrounded by comfortable seating. Marcus had arrived early and arranged his data pads and holographic displays in an organized fashion that spoke to his military background. "Doctor, thank you for taking the time for this," he said as she entered. "I know your schedule must be packed with the diplomatic team examinations." "Actually, I've been looking forward to this," Zarabeth replied, then immediately wondered if her response had been too revealing. "The human physiology data is fascinating from a medical perspective." Marcus gestured to a chair beside his, and as she settled into it, she noticed he had positioned the displays so they would need to sit fairly close together to review the material effectively. Whether this was intentional or simply practical, she found herself appreciating the proximity. "I thought we could start with some baseline human development data," Marcus said, activating a holographic display that showed the progression of human physiology from birth through maturity. "It might help explain some of the unusual readings you've been getting." The holographic human rotating slowly in the air between them was anatomically correct and remarkably detailed. Zarabeth found herself studying not just the educational content, but the way Marcus moved as he manipulated the display, the careful precision of his gestures, and the way his voice took on a slightly different tone when he was teaching. "Human infants are actually quite helpless compared to most species," Marcus explained, adjusting the display to show a newborn human. "We're born premature by galactic standards because our brain size requires us to be born before we're fully developed." "That seems disadvantageous from an evolutionary perspective," Zarabeth observed, though she was finding it difficult to concentrate on the academic discussion with Marcus sitting so close to her. "It would be, except that humans compensate through social cooperation and extended child-rearing periods. Human adults are incredibly protective of their young, and our social structures are built around ensuring child survival." As the holographic human aged through adolescence to adulthood, Zarabeth could see how the species' remarkable adaptability developed over time. The muscular and skeletal systems strengthened in response to environmental demands. The neural pathways became more complex and specialized, and the immune system learned to recognize and counter new threats. "This explains the redundancy I've been seeing in your physiological systems," she said, studying the display. "Your species doesn't just adapt to its environment, it over-adapts as a safety margin." "Exactly. Humans are built to survive worst-case scenarios. Our ancestors who survived were the ones who could handle everything, from ice ages to droughts to predator attacks to disease outbreaks." Marcus shifted the display to show comparative anatomy between humans and several other galactic species, and Zarabeth found herself leaning closer to study the details. The movement brought her into contact with his shoulder, and she was surprised by how warm he felt through the fabric of his uniform. "Sorry," she said, starting to pull away, but Marcus didn't move. "It's fine, Doctor. These displays are designed for close examination." The casual acceptance of physical contact sent another shiver through Zarabeth's nervous system. Most species maintained strict physical boundaries during professional interactions, but the human seemed comfortable with the proximity. "Commander," she said, studying a comparison between human and Velthari cardiovascular systems, "may I ask you something that's not strictly medical?" "Of course. How do humans typically react to other species? I mean, from a social and interpersonal perspective?" Marcus turned to look at her directly, and she realized their faces were quite close together. "That's an interesting question. Are you asking about human diplomatic protocols or something more personal?" The directness of his response caught her off guard. Most species would have deflected such a question or provided a formal, impersonal answer. "I suppose both. Your species seems remarkably adaptable socially as well as physically." "Humans are generally curious about other life forms," Marcus said thoughtfully. "We tend to be attracted to intelligence and competence regardless of species. Our diplomatic and military training emphasizes finding common ground and building relationships across cultural boundaries." "Attracted?" Zarabeth repeated, wondering if the translation matrix was providing the correct interpretation of his words. Marcus smiled, and she noticed that his eyes showed a warmth that seemed to intensify when he looked at her. Humans form emotional attachments to individuals they respect and admire. Species differences are usually secondary to personal compatibility. The conversation had moved well beyond professional territory, but Zarabeth found herself unwilling to redirect it back to safer ground. "And what attracts humans to specific individuals?" "Intelligence, definitely. competence in their chosen field. A sense of humor helps. Physical appearance varies widely in human preferences, but we tend to be drawn to beings who are healthy, confident, and genuinely interested in understanding others. As he spoke, Marcus's gaze seemed to linger on her face in a way that made her skin flush with those telltale purple patterns. Commander, are you suggesting that humans could find members of other species attractive in more than just a professional sense? I'm saying that I've found my interactions with you personally engaging beyond the requirements of our diplomatic mission, Marcus replied, his voice taking on a softer tone. Your thoroughness, your genuine curiosity about human biology, your obvious intelligence and competence, these are all qualities that humans find very appealing. Zarabeth felt her respiratory rate increase as she processed the implications of his words. You're indicating a personal interest that goes beyond our professional relationship? If that interest would be welcomed, yes. The directness of human communication was as remarkable as their physiology. Where most species would spend hours navigating complex social protocols before expressing personal interest, this human had simply stated his feelings clearly and waited for her response. Commander, she said carefully, I should mention that my interest in human physiology has become somewhat more personal than purely scientific. I hoped it might have, Marcus said, and his smile widened. You've been showing physiological responses during our interactions that seem to indicate more than professional curiosity. You've been monitoring my physiological responses? Zarabeth asked, though she found the idea more intriguing than concerning. Military training includes observation of behavioral and biological cues. Your skin coloration changes have been quite noticeable, and your breathing patterns shift when we're in close proximity. The fact that he had been aware of her physical responses throughout their interactions should have been embarrassing, but instead Zarabeth found it oddly comforting. The human had been paying attention to her as an individual, not just cooperating with a medical examination. So you knew I was attracted to you? I suspected, but I wanted to be certain before I said anything. Humans have learned to be careful about misinterpreting the social cues of other species. Zarabeth looked at the holographic displays still rotating between them, showing the remarkable adaptability and resilience of human physiology. Then back at Marcus's face. Your species really is extraordinary. Not just biologically, but socially and emotionally as well. We'd like to think so, Marcus said, reaching out to gently touch her hand. The question is, would you be interested in exploring how well our species might be compatible on a personal level? The warmth of his skin against hers sent signals through her nervous system that had nothing to do with medical analysis, and everything to do with attraction and possibility. I think I would be very interested in that research, Commander. The next morning, Zarabeth arrived at the medical bay with a completely different perspective on her work. Her evening with Marcus had extended well beyond their planned review of human physiological data, evolving into a personal conversation that had lasted several hours. They had talked about their respective careers, their homeworlds, their hopes for the diplomatic mission, and most surprisingly, their growing mutual attraction. What struck her most about the experience was how natural it had felt. Despite being completely different species, they had found common ground in their shared curiosity about the universe, their dedication to their professions, and their appreciation for intelligent conversation. The physical attraction was undeniable, but it was built on a foundation of genuine compatibility that transcended biological differences. Her assistant, Dr. Yeldan, noticed her improved mood immediately. Doctor, you seem remarkably energetic this morning. Did your consultation with the human commander go well? Very well, Zarabeth replied, trying to keep her skin from showing the purple flush that seemed to appear whenever she thought about Marcus. I learned a great deal about human physiology and psychology. The entire medical station is talking about your human examinations, Yeldan continued. Some of the senior physicians are questioning whether the readings you've documented are accurate. Dr. Felmoth suggested that your equipment might need recalibration. Zarabeth felt a spike of irritation at the suggestion that her work was somehow flawed. My equipment has been calibrated according to standard protocols. The unusual readings reflect genuine differences in human physiology. Of course, Doctor, but you must admit, some of the capabilities you've documented seem almost mythical. Enhanced healing, extreme stress resistance, redundant biological systems. It reads more like legend than medical fact. Before Zarabeth could respond, The medical bay door opened to admit the day's scheduled patient. She expected to see another member of the human diplomatic team, but instead found herself facing Marcus again, accompanied by a human she hadn't met before. "Dr. Zarabeth," Marcus said, and she noted the warmth in his voice as he spoke her name. "I'd like you to meet Chief Petty Officer Jackson Torres, our mission's security specialist." "Jack, this is Dr. Zarabeth, the physician I told you about." The new human was shorter than Marcus, but more heavily muscled, with skin bearing several small scars that spoke to a life of physical challenges. His handshake, when Zarabeth offered her manipulator appendage in the human greeting gesture Marcus had taught her, was firm but careful. "Pleasure to meet you, Doc," Jackson said. "Marcus says you're interested in human military capabilities. Hope I can provide some useful data." As Jackson settled onto the examination platform, Zarabeth began her now familiar routine of baseline scans. However, this human's readings immediately proved even more extraordinary than those of his predecessors. "Chief Torres," she said, studying her scanner display with amazement, "your muscle density is significantly higher than Commander Chen's. How is that possible?" "Special operations training, Doc. My unit goes through enhancement protocols that push human physiology to its upper limits. We're trained to operate in environments that would kill most baseline humans." The scans revealed a human body that had been systematically optimized for combat effectiveness. Jackson's cardiovascular system operated at even higher pressures than Marcus's. His bone density was remarkable, and his nervous system showed adaptations that suggested incredible reaction speeds. "This is fascinating," Zarabeth murmured, running a detailed scan of his muscular system. "Your body has been modified to exceed what I thought were the natural limits of human physiology." "Not modified, Doc. Trained. Everything you're seeing is the result of conditioning and exercise. Humans can push their bodies to remarkable extremes if they're willing to put in the work." Marcus moved closer to observe the readouts, and Zarabeth felt that familiar warmth at his proximity. "Jackson represents the upper end of human physical capability," he explained. "His unit is trained to survive and operate in conditions that would challenge powered armor." "Commander," Zarabeth said, "yesterday you mentioned that you were one of the less impressive examples of human physiology. I'm beginning to understand what you meant." "Wait until you meet Dr. Patel," Jackson said with a grin. "She's our enhanced longevity specialist. Been alive for over 200 years and still going strong." Zarabeth's scanner skipped as her manipulator appendages trembled slightly. 200 years? "But your species' natural lifespan is listed as roughly 100 years in the galactic database." "Baseline humans, sure," Marcus replied. "But we've developed life extension technologies that can significantly increase longevity while maintaining physical and mental capabilities." As she continued Jackson's examination, Zarabeth began to realize that everything she thought she knew about human limitations was based on incomplete information. The humans weren't just tough survivors from a dangerous world. They were an actively evolving species that was constantly pushing the boundaries of what biology could achieve. "Chief Torres," she said, conducting a neurological scan, "your brain activity patterns show modifications I haven't seen in the other humans I've examined." "Combat conditioning," Jackson explained. "My neural pathways have been trained for rapid threat assessment and response. I can process tactical information and make life or death decisions faster than baseline human reflexes allow." The implications were staggering. If humans could modify their own physiology through training and technology, then the already impressive capabilities she had documented might represent only the beginning of their potential. "Doctor," Marcus said quietly, moving to stand beside her as she worked, "I should mention that the diplomatic team was specifically chosen to represent the diversity of human capability. Each member showcases different aspects of what our species can achieve. Are you suggesting that every human I examine will demonstrate capabilities that exceed the previous ones?" "Not necessarily exceed, but complement. Dr. Okafor showed you our intellectual adaptability. Jackson here represents our physical optimization, and the remaining team members will demonstrate other aspects of human potential." Zarabeth completed Jackson's examination in a state of growing amazement. Each new human she encountered challenged her understanding of biological possibilities. More than that, each examination reinforced her appreciation for the species' remarkable nature. As Jackson prepared to leave, he paused to shake hands with Zarabeth again. "Doc, Marcus mentioned that you're interested in human culture as well as physiology. If you want to understand what makes us tick, you should join us for dinner tonight. The team's cooking traditional Earth food, and we'd love to have you as our guest. The invitation was clearly social rather than professional, and Zarabeth found herself looking to Marcus for guidance. His smile told her that he had been hoping she would accept. "I would be honored," she replied. "Where and when should I meet you?" "Human Quarters, Section 7, 1900 hours," Marcus said. "Fair warning, though. Human social gatherings can be quite different from most species' formal dining protocols." After the humans left, Zarabeth found herself anticipating the evening with excitement that went well beyond professional curiosity. She was genuinely interested in experiencing human social dynamics, but more than that, she was looking forward to spending more time with Marcus in a relaxed, personal setting. Dr. Yeldan approached with her compiled examination reports, his expression showing obvious skepticism. "Doctor, these readings for the human security specialist are even more extreme than your previous reports. Are you certain you're not experiencing some form of equipment malfunction?" Zarabeth looked at her assistant with new understanding. The medical establishment's skepticism about human capabilities wasn't just scientific caution. It was an inability to accept that a species could be so fundamentally different from everything else in the galaxy. "Yeldan," she said firmly, "I want you to observe tonight's examination personally. You can verify my equipment calibration and witness the results firsthand." "Tonight's examination?" The remaining human diplomat, Dr. Patel, the longevity specialist. Zarabeth smiled as she realized she was looking forward to discovering what new surprises the humans had in store for her. "I have a feeling she's going to challenge our assumptions even more than her colleagues have." The human quarters were unlike anything Zarabeth had expected. Instead of the sterile, functional spaces typical of most species' diplomatic accommodations, the humans had transformed their assigned living area into something warm and inviting. The lighting was softer than standard station illumination. There were what appeared to be decorative objects placed throughout the space, and the air carried a complex mixture of scents that her analytical mind identified as food preparation aromas. Marcus greeted her at the entrance, and she noticed he had changed from his formal diplomatic uniform into more casual clothing that somehow made him seem even more approachable. "Doctor, welcome to our home away from home," he said, gesturing for her to enter. "I hope you're prepared for a full cultural immersion experience." The main living area contained the entire human diplomatic team, and Zarabeth was struck by how different their group dynamic was from most alien delegations. Instead of maintaining formal hierarchical positions, they moved around each other with easy familiarity, sharing tasks and conversation in patterns that spoke to genuine camaraderie. "Dr. Zarabeth," Sarah called from what appeared to be a food preparation area. "Perfect timing. We're just putting the finishing touches on dinner." Jackson looked up from a device he was adjusting and grinned. "Doc, you're about to experience something special. Sarah is one of the best cooks in the human diplomatic corps." "Cooking?" Zarabeth asked, unfamiliar with the term in this context. "Food preparation as an art form," Marcus explained, guiding her toward a comfortable seating area. "Most species consume processed nutrition, but humans have developed food preparation into a complex cultural practice." Before she could ask for clarification, she was approached by a human female who appeared to be significantly older than the others, though her movements showed no signs of the physical degradation typical of aging in most species. "Dr. Zarabeth, I presume," the woman said, extending her hand in the human greeting gesture. "I'm Dr. Indira Patel. I understand you've been conducting some fascinating examinations of my colleagues." Zarabeth accepted the handshake, immediately noting that Dr. Patel's grip was as firm and controlled as those of the younger humans. "Dr. Patel, I'm looking forward to examining you tomorrow. Commander Chen mentioned that you represent human longevity research." "Among other things," Dr. Patel replied with a smile that reminded Zarabeth of Marcus's warmth. "But tonight is for cultural exchange, not medical discussions. Has anyone explained human social dining customs to you?" Before Zarabeth could respond, Sarah announced that the meal was ready, and the humans began gathering around a large table that had been set with individual place settings. Marcus guided Zarabeth to a seat beside his own, and she found herself surrounded by humans who seemed genuinely excited to share their cultural practices with her. The food that Sarah presented was unlike anything in Zarabeth's experience. Instead of the uniform nutrition pastes or synthesized proteins common to most species, the humans had prepared a variety of dishes with different colors, textures, and aromas. Everything was arranged in an aesthetically pleasing manner that suggested as much attention to visual appeal as to nutritional content. "This is incredible," Zarabeth said, studying the array of food before her. "You've transformed basic nutrition into something resembling art." "Cooking is one of humanity's oldest and most cherished cultural practices," Dr. Patel explained, serving herself portions of several different dishes. "We believe that sharing food creates social bonds and enhances the pleasure of eating." As the meal progressed, Zarabeth found herself drawn into conversations that ranged from serious discussions about interspecies diplomacy to light-hearted exchanges about cultural differences. The humans seemed genuinely interested in her perspective on galactic society, while sharing insights about human civilization that weren't available in any diplomatic briefing. "Doctor," Jackson said during a lull in the conversation, "Marcus mentioned that some of the medical staff are skeptical about your examination results. Are we really that unusual compared to other species?" "Extremely unusual," Zarabeth replied, noting how comfortable she felt discussing her work in this informal setting. "Your species demonstrates capabilities that challenge fundamental assumptions about biological limitations." "Such as?" Dr. Patel asked, her eyes showing the sharp intelligence that belied her apparent age. "Redundant systems, extreme adaptability, continuous self-improvement, enhanced healing, stress resistance that borders on the impossible." Zarabeth paused, realizing she was sharing professional observations with her test subjects. "I'm sorry, this probably isn't appropriate dinner conversation." "On the contrary," Sarah said, "it's fascinating to hear an outside perspective on human biology. Most of us take our capabilities for granted because we've never known anything different." Marcus leaned closer to Zarabeth, and she felt that familiar warmth at his proximity. "What's your professional opinion about human integration into galactic society?" The question was more loaded than it appeared on the surface. Zarabeth understood that her medical reports would be part of the evaluation process for human membership in the galactic community. "Honestly," she said, looking around the table at the assembled humans, "I think your species is going to change everything. Not just because of your physical capabilities, but because of your approach to challenges and relationships." "Meaning?" Dr. Patel prompted. "Most species in the galaxy have reached stable equilibrium points. They've adapted to their environments and settled into comfortable patterns of existence. Humans seem to be actively evolving, constantly pushing boundaries and seeking new possibilities." Jackson nodded thoughtfully. "That's probably accurate. Humans aren't really comfortable with status quo situations. We tend to want to improve things even when they're already working." "Which brings me to something I wanted to discuss with you, Dr. Zarabeth," Dr. Patel said, her expression becoming more serious. "Tomorrow's examination is going to show you some aspects of human development that might be concerning from a galactic perspective." "Concerning how?" "I represent the far end of human longevity research. My body has been modified and enhanced to extend life and capability far beyond baseline human norms. Some species might view these modifications as dangerous precedents." Marcus reached over and gently touched Zarabeth's hand, a gesture that sent familiar shivers through her nervous system. "We want you to be prepared for what you're going to find, because we value your opinion and want your support when the Medical Review Board evaluates our species." The statement carried implications that went beyond professional consultation. The humans were asking for her advocacy in the galactic community, and more than that, they were treating her as someone whose personal opinion mattered to them. "You have my support," Zarabeth said, meeting Marcus's eyes and then looking around the table at the others. "Not just as a medical professional, but as someone who believes that diversity and advancement benefit the entire galactic community." The evening continued with discussions about human art, music, literature, and philosophy, giving Zarabeth insights into a species that was remarkable not just for their physical capabilities, but for their intellectual and cultural complexity. When she finally prepared to leave, she realized that her attraction to Marcus had evolved into something deeper, genuine admiration for his entire species. "Marcus," she said as he walked her to the quarters entrance, "thank you for tonight. I learned more about humans in a few hours than I did in all my previous examinations." "Thank you for joining us," he replied, then hesitated before continuing. "Zarabeth, I know that personal relationships between species can be complicated, especially when one person is evaluating the other species for galactic membership. Are you concerned about potential conflicts of interest?" "I'm concerned about whether my feelings for you might complicate your professional responsibilities or vice versa." The directness of his concern touched her deeply. Most species would have ignored such potential complications or addressed them through formal protocols. This human was actually worried about her well-being and professional integrity. "Marcus," she said, moving closer to him, "my feelings for you have actually enhanced my understanding of your species. Personal connection provides insights that clinical examination cannot." He smiled, and she realized that his expressions had become as easy for her to read as those of her own species. "In that case, I'm looking forward to seeing what tomorrow's examination reveals about human potential." As Zarabeth returned to her own quarters, she reflected on how dramatically her life had changed in just a few days. She had begun this assignment expecting a routine medical evaluation, and instead had discovered a species that challenged everything she thought she knew about biology, evolution, and possibility. More than that, she had found herself attracted to an individual whose very existence expanded her understanding of what life could become. Dr. Yeldan arrived at the medical bay early, carrying portable calibration equipment and wearing the expression of someone prepared to prove a point. He had spent the previous evening reviewing Zarabeth's examination reports with increasing skepticism, and she knew he expected to find evidence of equipment malfunction or procedural error. "Doctor," he said, setting up his calibration devices, "I've completed a thorough analysis of your reported human capabilities. Some of the readings you've documented exceed the theoretical maximums for carbon-based life forms." "Which readings specifically?" Zarabeth asked, though she suspected she knew what was coming. "Cardiovascular pressure tolerances, cellular regeneration rates, neural processing speeds, immune system complexity, and stress response capabilities. According to established biological models, a single organism cannot excel in all these areas simultaneously." Before Zarabeth could respond, the medical bay door opened to admit Dr. Patel, accompanied by Marcus. The elderly human moved with the same fluid grace she had demonstrated the previous evening, showing none of the decreased mobility typical of aging in most species. "Dr. Zarabeth, Dr. Yeldan," Dr. Patel said, greeting them with the confident demeanor of someone accustomed to being the most experienced person in any room. "I understand there are some questions about the accuracy of human physiological data." Yeldan looked up from his equipment with obvious surprise. "Dr. Patel, forgive me, but according to your file, you are over 200 years old. Yet your physical presentation appears to be that of a much younger individual." "Appearances can be deceiving," Dr. Patel replied, settling onto the examination platform, "though in this case they're reasonably accurate. My biological age is approximately 35, despite my chronological age." Zarabeth activated her scanning equipment, noting that Yeldan's calibration devices showed perfect functionality. Whatever readings she obtained from Dr. Patel would be unquestionably accurate. The initial scans immediately revealed why Dr. Patel had warned her to be prepared. The human's physiology showed modifications that went far beyond anything Zarabeth had encountered in her previous examinations. "Dr. Patel," she said, studying the cardiovascular readings with amazement, "your circulatory system appears to be operating at efficiency levels that exceed baseline human norms by significant margins." "Life extension technology," Dr. Patel explained. "My cardiovascular system has been enhanced to maintain optimal function indefinitely. The same modifications have been applied to most of my major organ systems." Yeldan moved closer to observe the readings, his skin showing the pale yellow coloration that indicated shock. "These efficiency levels are impossible. No known species demonstrates such optimization." "Dr. Yeldan," Marcus said quietly, "you're looking at the future of human development. Dr. Patel represents what our species is capable of becoming with sufficient technological advancement." The examination continued, revealing layer after layer of enhancements and modifications. Dr. Patel's skeletal system had been reinforced beyond even Jackson's military conditioning. Her muscular development maintained peak efficiency despite her age, and her nervous system showed processing capabilities that bordered on the superhuman. "Your brain activity," Zarabeth said, Studying the neurological scans shows patterns I've never seen before. You're simultaneously processing multiple streams of complex information while maintaining perfect awareness of your immediate environment. Cognitive enhancement, Dr. Patel replied. My neural pathways have been optimized for maximum information processing and retention. I can access memories from decades ago with perfect clarity while learning new information at accelerated rates, but it was the cellular analysis that truly left both Felthari doctors speechless. Dr. Patel's cells showed regeneration and repair capabilities that effectively eliminated aging as a biological process. Her immune system had been enhanced to recognize and counter threats that didn't exist in nature, and her entire body showed the kind of systematic optimization that most species only achieve through mechanical augmentation. Dr. Patel, Yeldon said, his voice carrying a note of awe. You're not just human anymore. You're something entirely new. I'm human enhanced, she corrected gently. Everything you're seeing is built on the foundation of baseline human biology. We haven't replaced our nature. We've fulfilled its potential. Zarabeth completed her scans and found herself looking at data that redefined her understanding of what biological life could achieve. Dr. Patel represented not just individual enhancement, but proof that humans were actively evolving beyond the limitations that constrained other species. Doctor, Marcus said, addressing Zarabeth directly, what's your professional assessment? The question carried weight beyond mere medical evaluation. Zarabeth understood that her response would influence how the galactic community viewed humanity's application for membership. Professionally, she said, reviewing her complete data set from all the human examinations, I believe your species represents the most significant advancement in biological evolution that the galaxy has ever encountered. And personally? Dr. Patel asked with a slight smile. Zarabeth looked at Marcus, feeling again that warmth and attraction that had grown stronger with each interaction. Personally, I believe humans are going to change the galaxy in ways we can't even imagine yet. Yeldon finished his analysis of the examination data, his expression showing reluctant acceptance of what he had witnessed. Dr. Zarabeth, I owe you an apology. Your equipment calibration was perfect. Your procedures were flawless and your results are accurate. Humans really are as remarkable as your reports indicated. More remarkable, Zarabeth replied. Each examination has revealed new aspects of human potential. Dr. Patel stood from the examination platform, moving with that effortless grace that seemed to characterize all humans. Dr. Zarabeth, Dr. Yeldon, you've both been witnesses to something unprecedented in galactic history. The question now is whether the galactic community is ready to accept what humans represent. Which is what exactly? Yeldon asked. Evolution in action, Marcus replied. Most species reach a stable point and stop developing. Humans see stability as a temporary plateau before the next advancement. As the examination concluded, Zarabeth found herself facing a decision that would affect both her professional future and her personal happiness. The Medical Review Board would expect her to provide a recommendation about human integration into galactic society, and she knew that recommendation would carry significant weight. Commander, she said, addressing Marcus formally, I will be submitting a report that strongly recommends immediate acceptance of humanity into the galactic community. Thank you, Marcus replied, though his expression suggested he had hoped for more than professional support. However, Zarabeth continued, allowing her skin to show the purple flush that had become associated with her attraction to this human, I will also be requesting reassignment to work with the human diplomatic mission on a permanent basis. In what capacity? Dr. Patel asked with obvious amusement. As a medical liaison and cultural exchange specialist, Zarabeth replied, then looked directly at Marcus. And as someone who has discovered that some of the most interesting research involves personal compatibility between species. Marcus's smile was bright enough to illuminate the entire medical bay. Dr. Zarabeth, I think that would be an excellent research project. 6 months later, Zarabeth found herself working aboard the first joint human galactic research vessel, serving as chief medical officer for a crew that included representatives from dozens of species. Her relationship with Marcus had evolved into something that neither of their species had experienced before, but which seemed to work perfectly for both of them. More importantly, her medical research into human enhancement technologies was helping other species overcome biological limitations they had accepted as permanent. The humans hadn't just joined the galactic community. They had begun transforming it into something greater than it had ever been before. As she completed her daily medical rounds, checking on crew members whose enhanced capabilities would have seemed impossible just months earlier, Zarabeth reflected on how dramatically her life had changed since that first examination. She had expected to conduct a routine medical assessment, and instead had discovered a species that redefined what life could become. And in the process, she had found love with a being whose very existence proved that the universe was full of possibilities she had never imagined.